Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a list, another one that you suggested. You keep asking me, and I just can't resist doing them. So we did the greatest musical beginnings, and we did the greatest musical endings, and a couple of you have asked for the greatest musical climaxes in the middle parts. Now, this is a little harder to describe because I can't play samples of all of them, and it doesn't make any sense to play samples unless they are the ones that are the most amazing of all of the climaxes, and those I can't always get permission to do. So I am just going to tell you what they are, and I'll probably sing a few bars so you could find them yourself. But yeah, this was beyond fun. I mean, it really is. So here's my list of 10, the biggest internal climaxes in all of music, period, whether it's symphonic or just orchestral tone, but it's all orchestral, of course, because, yeah, I mean, you might want me to do like string quartet climaxes or piano sonata climaxes. We could do that. Maybe we will, because we're just having such a good time talking about this stuff. We'll see how it goes. But, as long as we're all on the same page and enjoying ourselves, I see no reason to quit. So, big, huge, amazing orchestral climaxes. Number 1, Tchaikovsky. Oh, was he a climax guy, wasn't he? I mean, really, I had a hard time picking one. It was difficult. Initially, I was going to pick the concluding scene of Swan Lake, because at least in Leonard Slatkin's recording, it's one of the most cosmic things you've ever heard in your life. I mean, it just goes nuts. It's amazing. But I said, wait, let's do one that has a better chance of coming off in other performances. And so I chose the central climax in the first movement of the Pathetique Symphony, the 6th. Holy mackerel. Now, you know which one I mean, right? It's just after the big tune, the bass clarinet or bassoon is dying away. Actually, it's written for bassoon, but usually a bass clarinet plays it because Tchaikovsky marks it 6 pianos, and bassoons really can't play that softly normally, although these days they can. They're very good. But then it's the crash, right? Bum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum, bum, bum, ba-bum, bum, ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum, bum, bum, ba-bum, bum. Well, okay, that's all I need to do, right? It's fabulous. Then it works up from one paroxysm of hysteria to the next until that unbelievable exordium, that goes into the recapitulation and brings back the love theme, the beautiful theme. Da 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 do 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 do. Well, before that, when the brass are just going, ya da da da, pwam 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 pwam, ya da da da, pwam 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 pwam. Okay, that's the moment, and you know it. And that's got to be one of the great climaxes. I mean, come on, it's unbeatable, absolutely unbeatable. Next, well, we have to talk about the 9th. Yes, the first movement recapitulation. I mean, it's da 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 pow da da with the tippity bum. Oh boy. Another unbelievable orchestral exordium, and one that very seldom comes off well in performance because it's very, very badly scored. Remember, Beethoven was deaf. Nobody plays it the way he wrote it. You can't. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, the timpani part is unplayable, and in Berlin, they use 2 sets of timpani, one to do the rolls and one to go ba-dum like that. And even with double winds and all that stuff, it's just everybody's fortissimo. Everything is fortissimo for like minutes. And you have to balance it and figure out what you're going to do and who's going to do what. It's very, very difficult. But you get the concept. It's just this unbelievably transcendent moment because, the opening of the symphony, that same music is very soft and very mysterious. And then all of a sudden, it's like, the orchestra is ablaze. And hearing that whole passage reimagined at a steady fortissimo is just one of the most, intense things in all of music. So yes, he gets the credit for that one. Number 3, well, this one is a little trashy, but it gets the job done. The thunderstorm in Strauss's Alpine Symphony. Now, music is full of storms. I mean, storm scenes, people love to do them, and composers love to write them, and they're all lots of fun. I mean, tremendously fun and often very, very effective. But the Alpine Symphony has got a thunderstorm to end all thunderstorms because it is also the recapitulation of the entire work. So it's a big sort of contrapuntal development / recapitulation / thematic, farrago with an organ in it, and it has a thunder sheet, which you never hear except in Schulte's recording, by the way. I've seen it. You can see it. You watch it. There's like this huge piece of Reynolds wrap, aluminum foil on the back of the orchestra. This guy's shaking it, and you're not hearing anything. You need to have some thunder simulacrum in there that works, and 2 sets of timpani, and the whole insanity of this immensely, ridiculously huge orchestra with 8 horns. Actually, there are 20 other horns off stage. They might as well, you might as well throw them in there, and Wagner tubas, and the whole shebangy. That's a great storm. It's absolutely fabulous. And it was obviously Strauss's intention to do the ultimate orchestral thunderstorm, and he pulled it off. He really pulls it off. It's just phenomenal. Next, well, this one is more emotional. Let me see. What do we got here? Yes, it is. Actually, I wrote it wrong. Hang on. I'm just fixing this now so that when I put the list up later, it won't sound stupid. There we go. Okay, Elgar, Symphony No. 2, the Scherzo, the third movement. Now, the third movement has a climax that Elgar described as like having a migraine. When you're up and your head is pounding, and it's like someone driving a hammer into your brain. It's an emotional climax, but it's also quite intense. It involves the return of the evil theme. He called it, a malign influence wandering through the garden. And that tune first appears in the development section of the first movement. And it's an amazing thing that Elgar does. It really is, because it's quite similar to what Beethoven does, actually, because it begins very softly. The first 2 times you hear it, it's very sensual. It's very decadent. It's typically British. Sex equals bad, actually, in the way he does it, because it's a very sensual and luscious moment. And it's very attractive for that reason. And then that attractive thing comes back in a quicker tempo in the scherzo, and loudly from the full string section with the tap, 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 tap rhythm behind it. And that rhythm becomes more and more prominent until it becomes that painful pulsation. Now, most performances don't do it the way Elgar describes it. They just aren't loud enough. They're not vicious enough. They don't pay attention to his dynamics and let the percussion continue to make a crescendo after the big cymbal crash until it practically blows you against the back wall. Macaris does it, Slatkin does it, a few other people do it. But it's one of the great climaxes in all of music, for sure. Totally amazing, incredibly powerful. And, there's an equivalent movie scene. I've talked about this before. That scene in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, when the Ark opens and the ghost of what looks initially like a beautiful woman comes floating out, and then it becomes a horrible demon. It goes, the beauty becomes something evil and menacing. That is exactly what Elgar's doing. It's the exact musical equivalent of that. I so wish they had used that in the movie. I don't know if it would have timed out properly, but they should have built the whole scene around that moment in Elgar's Second Symphony, because it's perfect. So that's a really cool one. That's number 4. Number 5, Jan Leifs. Yeah, the Icelandic guy who does nothing but natural disasters. Now, I could have chosen Hekla, but because we want central climaxes for the most part, we're not talking about ending climaxes. Hekla is nothing but a climax. It has an introduction, and then it just piles on one, pile of noise to the net, after the other, because that's a volcanic eruption. It just gets louder and louder and bigger. No, I chose the first of his Icelandic natural eruption pieces, Geysir, because Geysir really does what a geyser does. I mean, I've been there. I've been to Geysir. Geysir's a place. It's the thing that gave us the international vocabulary, the word Geysir. It's a thing. And Geysir at the moment is dormant. It's been dormant since the 1950s, unfortunately. But it's in a field of geysers. And there's one next to it called something like Struckel something or whatever. And that one goes off like every 10 minutes. So you can watch it. And if you listen to what Leifs does, it's, the water starts to percolate and it starts to bubble up and then it goes down. Then it bubbles up, then it goes down. Then it bubbles up, then it goes down. And then finally it just, out it comes. And then finally settles down. It finally dies down into just a stream of running water that's left over from the whole thing. That is exactly what this does. So it is a piece of music that is about a central climax. It's only about 10 minutes long, 9 minutes or something. It's amazing. It's not only amazingly descriptive of what it's supposed to be descriptive of, but it is a phenomenal central climax piece. Extraordinary. And so if you don't know Geysir, you don't know what a fabulous central climax can be. And believe me, when Leifs does one of these things, he pulls out all the stops. It's just amazing. So that's terrific. That was number 5, right? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Next. Well, this was a toughie too. Shostakovich. I mean, who wrote better gut punch climaxes than Shostakovich? And particularly in his big orchestral slow movement first movements that build to a central climax that spills over into the recapitulation. He actually got that format from the first movement of Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony, where you have just an incredibly turbulent development section that spills over into a huge climactic statement of the opening theme by way of recapitulation. And he does that. He does it in the 5th, in the 7th, in the 8th, in the 10th. All of those movements would have qualified for fabulous central climaxes. So I said I'm not doing any of them. The one I chose was the fugue from the Fourth Symphony's first movement. Because if that isn't one of the most insane moments in all of music, I don't know what is. It's the world's fastest fugue in the strings. It's all over the place, and they just come in one after another, and then they finally just throw the fugue out. The wood blocks come in, and the snare drums going, and the whole enormous brass section piles on, and it becomes just this completely insane maelstrom of orchestral fury. Oh, wow, what a moment. What an unbelievable moment. And what an unbridled kind of outpouring of just musical panic. And Shostakovich, he never did it again. Not quite that way. Because, what happened to him after that, and Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk. It's the orchestral equivalent, actually, of the sex scene in Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk, which is just as crazy as that is. It's just an astonishingly daring feat of orchestral malevolence. And, oh boy, I'm getting like hot and bothered just talking about it. It makes you want to sweat. It's incredible. So the fugue from Shostakovich's first movement. Next, this one's a slow movement. It's one you might not have seen coming, but it is one of the great climaxes. Albert Roussel's Symphony No. 3, the Adagio. The Adagio is just an incredibly dark, moving, bittersweet piece of music. It's exceptional, and it rises to one of the all-time great musical climaxes in 20th century symphonic writing. It's powerful beyond belief. Of course, it's capped by an enormous tam-tam crash, which, if you can hear it in the performance in question, Leonard Bernstein's on DG. Listen to that one. It's really, really exceptional. And, some of the other ones are too, but it's just dum, ba, ya, da, da, dum, ba, ya, da, da, dum, ba. It repeats that over and over as behind it, this enormous thing builds up with a cymbal roll and the bass drum, and the timpani, and the snare drum, and the orchestra is going, da, 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 da. The timpani come in with bum, bum, da, dum, bum, bum, ba, dum, bum, bum, and then crash at the top of it with the violins screaming at the top of their range, and a beautiful, consoling sort of cadence afterwards. It's an incredibly powerful moment. unbelievably powerful. And, people usually don't think about, French composers as delivering incredibly powerful emotional statements. People don't think about French composers as symphonists generally, but that's one of the biggies. I mean, it's as powerful as like a Shostakovich thing. It's extraordinary. So, give the Adagio of Roussel's Third Symphony a shot. You'll be very, very pleasantly surprised if you are a climactic kind of person. That central climax is one of the big ones. Absolutely major, major stuff. Next, another guy who I love to talk about, who doesn't get his share of the pie, Carl Nielsen. Now, in my great beginnings, I talked about his Symphony No. 3, the Espansiva. But you Nielseniacs all know that when we talk about great climaxes, there are two options. There is the timpani battle in the finale of the Fourth Symphony, which I didn't really do because that has the big climax at the end. So I chose the snare drum battle in the first movement of the Fifth Symphony, which is unbelievably emotionally gripping. It may not be the loudest, but it's one of them. I mean, you've got a snare drummer improvising at random to stop the progress of the orchestra, which is what Nielsen says he has to do. And the orchestra is progressing forward with a noble, fulfilling adagio theme in a slow tempo. The snare drum is at a completely different tempo. And all of the evil elements, the and the woodwinds are flying around this whole operation. And it finally builds up to just this overwhelmingly glorious climax. It's one of the most, it's a transcendental moment. That's all I can say. When it finally goes, it has a fulfilling quality. It makes you feel so satisfied. I mean, it's just this warm, noble, brilliant, sincere. I don't know how else to describe it. I think noble is the best word. It just has that. There's this incredibly beautiful quality about it, a quality of seriousness, striving, and goodness to the music. I mean, does music have moral qualities? Well, I don't know. But yeah, that's how I feel about it. You just get this feeling of just good has triumphed. Of course, it doesn't quite. The snare drum comes whipping back and it finally dies down and fades away. It's for the second movement to achieve that final apotheosis, which some of you have pointed out makes one of the great endings in all of music as well. But that first movement climax is really, really special. One of the great moments in the symphonic literature. And my God, there's nothing that gives you that same feeling of release when it's over. It's indescribable. It's an incredible moment. It really is. Next, well, we have to do a Mahler, don't we? I mean, you cannot talk about orchestral climaxes without talking about Mahler. He was one of the big climax guys at the beginning, in the middle, and the end, everywhere in between. Boy, could he write a climax. But I picked one, well, my favorite one. It's the one from the finale of the Second Symphony. And it seldom sounds the way it's supposed to. But it's the one right after the big explosion. I mean, there's so many climaxes. It's one that goes one after another, after another, after another in that finale, because it's a series of variations. And each one rises to this enormous climax after the Dead March. When it goes to the same moment that we heard in the first movement. Da, 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 da. Then crash, the whole thing blows away. After that, we think that's the moment. No, it's the last run before the offstage cadenza and the chorus comes in. It starts with a little tremolo, the trom going ya-dum, ya-da-da-da-da-dum. And then you have an offstage band of trumpets and cymbals, bass drum, and triangle. They're going dum ba da da dum ba da 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 da. Now Mahler indicates that is supposed to become much closer at the end of that passage. It never happens because these people would often run closer somehow. It's not even realized properly on recordings most of the time. Be good if it were. Bernstein did it right. Bernstein managed to do it in his DG recording. I think it's pretty good that way. You just have to have lots and lots of players and station them at various positions, only for a couple bars of music. It's hardly worth it. But But then after that happens, you have the trombones coming in with pa 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 ta 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 dum bum pa 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 pa. That thing, and it just gets bigger and bigger. Da 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 dum bum pa 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 da 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 dum bum da 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 dum bum. Timpani bum 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 bum. Then okay, so let's do it, shall we? This is what you're supposed to hear. Well, at least from the tam tam part. It goes crash with the cymbals. Da 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 da. It's really difficult to bring off. Really, really difficult, but it's amazing. It's da 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 ba 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 ba. Then it's okay. Now, the reason you don't normally hear it the way you're supposed to hear it is because of that, because it was like drown out everything. But and the dynamics in the score in the revised version, Mahler tamped them down to like piano with accents, so that you're going da 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 crash crash. You're supposed to hear it. Who cares how? Because it's a very high sound. There's nothing underneath. So if you do it right, you actually hear it. It's unbelievable. Da 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 ba 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 bum. Da 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 da. I'll put this back later. And then there's just stillness. And then you have the offstage stuff, and the chorus comes in, and the rest, as they say, is history. But as a central climax, that's one of the most amazing. It's just astonishing. It's thrilling. So that's number 9. But number 10 is not that. My number 10, there we go. Get that down. My number 10 is Sibelius's on Saga. That's it. It is the absolute music equivalent of a car going 100 miles an hour and running into a brick wall. I mean, that's what happens in that music. It's because you've got this bass drum going bum ba-dum bum 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 bum ba-dum, and it gets bigger and bigger and louder, and the strings are going like this. Like that, and then the brass are going da 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 da, crash, and it just goes splat and stops. I think that's one of the most shocking and powerful climaxes in all of music. And then there's the slow die away coda, but wow, it's special. It's really extraordinary. And that's my number 10, and I'm getting tired. I hope you enjoyed these 10 amazing central climaxes, and now you know where to find them as well. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.